Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this is episode 3 with our friend, well, it's episode 150 something, but it's episode 3 with our friend Kyle Feather, who is in his first year of teaching, and he has been so awesome to come along throughout the year and share where he is in the journey. Now, if you remember way back from the first one, I met Kyle Feather this summer while doing the Cantorai Summer Choral Institute with Chris Muntz in Kansas City, and Kyle came up for the whole event and was just an intern helping around everywhere, and he was so eager to learn and ask questions about singing and conducting and choiring. I'm like, what are you doing with your life? This is so awesome. He's like, I'm going to be a first-year teacher. And so that's where the idea came from for this series. And my hope is that as you're listening, you're reminded of the fun moments of your first year. Or if you're listening and you're becoming a student teacher or you're about to start teaching, that it gives you things to think about. But mostly, I hope that it just inspires you because what we get to do is so cool. If you think back, our first episode with Kyle was all about how he was utilizing what he learned in college in the classroom. And then the second time, we talked about expectations and what he had experienced and what expectations he wanted to change or which ones he now understood. And in this episode, we talk about diversification as Kyle is now diving into all the other things that happen as a choir director. And y'all, he is still just so positive and so good at one-liners. So you'll have to listen. He has a great wrap-up quote for you. You'll have to listen all the way to the end. I'm so excited for our sponsor, Perform International. They are making the podcast possible. All of their funds go to support streaming and storage of the service and all of that stuff that goes with putting a podcast together. So thank you so much, Perform International. If you are thinking of going anywhere, traveling anywhere, international or national, they make the best tours and they put on some of the most high-class festivals. You totally need to check it out. Perform-international.com. All right, that is enough of me talking. Of course, if you want more talking, there's those monthly bonus episodes over on patreon.com/musicedmatters. That's enough. Let's hear from our friend Kyle Feather and his third installment of I'm a first-year teacher and here's what I'm doing. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are talking to our friend Kyle Feather. Hello, Kyle.
Hello, Emmy. It's good to be back.
I'm so excited for our third installment of Hi, my name is Mr. Feather and I'm a first-year teacher.
Hi, my name is Mr. Feather and I'm still learning so many things. Yeah.
That's awesome. You know, I was thinking back to our first episode happened on your very first day of teaching, real life teaching. And my favorite quote was the one you talked about. You felt like you were a bathtub. Could you remind us of that awesome analogy that you used?
Yes. And I will say this, honestly, I do use a lot of crazy analogies. So this may be paraphrased to some degree, but I believe it was, there are so many things that I've learned from college and I'm just trying to retain as much as I can on a day-to-day basis. So trying to keep myself from forgetting all of these things that I've learned from college. So just always trying to brain dump at the end of each day and trying to reflect on what I'm doing and trying to grow. So
is it working? Is your bathtub full of water?
Well, yes. No, I would say so. Definitely coming into the semester and especially coming back after spring break, because this is my second day back after spring break. I was just really excited and happy with how today went. And I find myself coming back to teaching feeling more and more comfortable, which is something that I didn't necessarily anticipate. I thought I'd just be, a little bit anxious every time, but now when I have some idea of where my kids are and how how things are going and what the next step is. I have a sense of direction, with where I can go. And instead of me kind of not knowing what to expect, I kind of have an idea of, okay, well, this is where we are. So now let's see where our next steps are.
So do you think that's related to content or to relationships or to pedagogy or practices that you're picking up as you're in front of them every day? What is it related to?
Sure. Well, I mean, definitely a combination of them all. Knowing where my kids are is really important, and I do feel like I foster those relationships. For instance, yesterday we had a 9-10 honor choir, which is our freshmen and sophomores all getting together. And for those of them that had auditioned and were placed into the choir, they got to have their performance and just getting to chat with some of those students and then come back after break and kind of see where students were, kind of knowing what we need to work on, kind of knowing what it is that we had accomplished on that Friday before break, and then preparing for, okay, well, we're in this place on our music, we're in this place in terms of sight reading, because here in Texas, we have what's called the University Interscholastic League, which is just a fancy way to say it's like state testing for choir performance and sight reading.
I've never heard anyone actually say all three of the words. I just always knew it was UIL, but I never knew that's what it stood for. That sounded so fancy.
I know, and I sound so Texan right now. I sound like I have such a big ego, but really, it's just a fancy way to say, everyone gets nervous because all of their kids go into sight read music that they literally get in the moment, and it has your low do to la's, it has your do fa's in the tenor line, it has all these certain predictable jumps, and it's in one of many keys. So it's just something that we're all, as Texans, as Texas music educators, we're all just looking forward to, and in a way not looking forward to. But definitely coming back after break, I'm thinking about, okay, well, how do we prepare for those things? So for instance, right before spring break ended, my basses were doing a really good job of getting that do la down. And then we had a sight reading that did do to la and then la to lo fa. And that la to lo fa, we lost it. So, it's a lot of trying to break down those basic building blocks. And whenever I have a break, take a little bit of time to reflect and go, okay, where did we end? And then how can we best proceed? How can I give them instruction to take them to help us grow as much as we can? So, I guess talking about those four things that you mentioned earlier, the Texas Music Educators Association, which happens in February, which is kind of like a state convention, and KMEA, CMEA, that sort of stuff. That also was really helpful for me, just being able to listen to some groups for some inspiration, but more importantly, to attend some clinics and just soak up as much as I can from clinicians like Nathan Dame and just so many other people. So just there's always things to learn. And when you're a youngin', there is a lot of room to grow. So just trying to plant my roots and keep picking up skills, but not get overwhelmed in the process.
I love that you're still taking so much time to reflect and think, okay, they did this well, but they didn't do this well. Why? How can I make that sequencing better? And it's great to hear just how comfortable and happy you are in the classroom. So in the first time we talked, you talked about the bathtub example. And the second time we talked, it was more kind of about confidence and expectations. And you were talking about, you had just gotten through your first round of concerts. What type of things have you gained concert-wise since then?
Sure. Well, I think for one, when the students came back after winter break, they know what to expect now. So since they know what to expect, we could kind of build on those standards, and we could kind of start getting some real work done. So, of course, our groups had some auditions and stuff coming up, and literature to learn and stuff like that. And I just feel like a lot of second semester is not creating the vehicle that you're driving, but it is literally just trying to drive it smoothly and navigate. So we've established some good long-term skills. Now it's applying it to repertoire and through repetition and intentionality, trying to work on, building tone in the group and intonation and just so many more of those kind of next level principles. But it is also kind of interesting because when sometimes we come back and we're like, okay, well, looks like one of the wheels came off of the car. like it'll be a random day and it'll be like, okay, well, I guess we just forgot how to sing in tune. So we, you just have to sometimes you just have to spend 5 or 10 minutes to just build the car again, and then you can drive through some repertoire. But there is no shot that you're gonna, get through the desert without a wheel. You're driving on the ground. So
man. That brings back all those ideas. What was that? We used to play Oregon Trail or something on those old apples. I might be dating myself. Did you ever play Oregon Trail?
I'm so sorry. I don't know what you're
Oh
talking
no, no. And the
about.
wheels would fall off and you'd get sick and you get stuck and there was no food. And it was like those old screen apples. Okay, I'm done dating myself. We're moving on. So what type of techniques, before we go on to your newest topic for session number 3 here, what
Sure.
type of techniques do you see yourself using to put those wheels back on the wagon car?
Wagon, car, vehicle, yes. What am I working on the most? It's definitely intonation and its tone. I feel like for the fall concert, we had a lot of tenor basses that I encouraged to sing fully, and that helped them, I think, to build musical skills, so sight reading chops, and just confidence, especially because a large portion of my kids are not, just don't happen to be from the middle schools. They, like transfer in or, stuff like that. There are a lot that come in from the middle schools and have those foundations set in stone, which is really helpful. But I can't teach to the strongest kids. I have to help those fundamentals for all those kids, with the hope that they'll stay in choir and be able to perform in the higher, the older ensembles, or as we call in Texas, the varsity ensembles.
I always forget that's the
yeah,
coolest thing. Okay.
I know. Yeah, no. Well, it's kind of a weird. I don't love that phrase because it is not. It's a little bit. It can come off a little bit kind of elitist, or it can come off in the wrong context. It's just not as that one group is higher than another. But truly, it is best, I think, for a program to have some opportunities for all students to shine, and it's not, not everyone can be in, that top ensemble their first year. So that's exactly what my group's all about. You give the foundational fundamentals, those things that those kids need to succeed, and then let the kids that are driven, rise, and let the kids that maybe need more work or need some time, you give them the patience that they need. But yeah, I guess to take it all back, so tone was definitely one of the things that I needed to grow on, and that's something that I've tried to work through vowel rounding, all through embouchure, and just building more intonation skills with the group and more sensitivity with how they sing. So kind of practicing listening, how they gel with the people next to them. But I won't lie, that's something that I'm still working on. And I can't beat myself up over feeling like I'm strong at certain things like music literacy while not mastering things like tone immediately, because I've only had so much time in the classroom. So I think if I could go back, I'd try and teach more tone from the beginning. And I think part of that is like the reflection of the first year. And I think I mentioned this in our conversation, but I said this to a lot of people, like, you just have to be honest. Like, your first year is when you're going to be the worst at your job, and that's okay. Like, it's almost more of a learning experience than it is a real job, because there are so many people around you to learn from, so much to soak up, and there's so much that you will learn from your first year of students. So a lot of teachers have told me they wish they could go back to their first year of students and apologize. And I'm sure in a couple of years, I'll probably look back in the same way and be like, yeah, I wish I could have given them more, but I owe it to myself to do as much as I can in this first year and to grow as much as I can. And I feel like you can't regret, how things are going. You just have to keep a positive mindset, keep on going, and try and pick up as much as you can along the way. So this semester is definitely like a tone. That's definitely what we've been working on. And we've simplified the literature a little bit, to help them to move from the music literacy to tone focus. So a lot of pure Italian songs we're doing to work on vowel unification, and just songs that are a little smoother and just give them a little more time to really try and lock stuff. We're doing a Laura Farnell piece called Rain Music, which I just adore. And the boys just really love, the tenor basses really just love that song. It just fits their voice really well. And I just keep on giving them, more and more every single day, just little things about, let's get this vowel like this. Let's remove, tighten this diphthong so that it's a nice, clear, pure vowel. And just try and be patient with them too, because if you if you lose your patience, then they will lose their patience. They become who you are in the room.
Yes, that's a good reminder too. I was just teaching this past week in my methods class, choral methods. We were talking about the layering process and the rehearsal process because Robert Shaw has this great book all about layering and blah, blah, blah. Have you watched those super old Robert Shaw videos on YouTube of him rehearsing the major works for Carnegie?
I don't think I have.
Okay, I'll send them over to you, and I might stick a link in the episode notes. But what was so cool, we watched a little 5-minute clip, just a short one, to analyze all the different layers. And it was literally this little blessed are they. And he was like, he did the whole process from the count singing to the speaking on the Shaw chord to adding that really distinct where every consonant goes. And it was beautiful and so fast paced and so engaging, but it had everything in it. Rhythmic and accuracy and intensity. It had that clear diction. It had that beautiful tone. I mean, professionals and adults and all that stuff. But just the layering process was beautiful teaching. And every time I watch that clip, I'm like, oh, such great teaching. Trial and error all the time. I love that you're acknowledging that there's still stuff to learn. Yeah. Because there's always something, someone's going to come in every single year that has some sound, I call it, error detection. What is the error that is happening? Where is it the source? And how do we fix it from the source? And that's something you're constantly learning and developing and growing with. So the fact that you are aware that you don't know all the answers and that this is your year of the most growth, that's really awesome and exciting. Okay, so let's move into our third installment. So you were telling me before we recorded that you've really been doing a little bit of diversification. So if the first session we chatted was all about getting your feet wet and understanding what you needed to do, and the second one's about expectations, 3 is about diversification. What does that mean?
I think it means, to me, it is, what do you encompass as a choir teacher, and how can you find ways to connect with students and to connect with faculty beyond simply what happens in the room? So I feel like this semester I've made it a personal mission to try and really connect with the departments around me and to try and build synergy with those departments, because something that I always talk about with my friends is the kids that double dip in multiple fine arts, or the kids that double dip in sports and fine arts. There's something special about that. There's something that is enhanced by connecting across multiple different mediums, I think. So, for instance, working with musical this semester, or collaborating with the jazz band. Earlier this semester, we had a jazz choir concert, basically, which was so it collaborated with the jazz band. We got to perform our brand new group, the DHS Jazz Singers, got to perform alongside a pickup band from the jazz band world that is also part of DHS and an extension of the program. And then we also got to have we also invited the UNT Jazz Singers to perform with us. So we got to, on the same concert, perform pieces, and there were just lots of wonderful opportunities where our students got to mingle, and they talked about multiple pieces that we had performed that they had experienced before, and it was just a great collaboration between UNT Jazz and DHS Jazz, UNT being a college just really close to us. So that is a sense of collaboration that I feel like was really exciting for me and really exciting for our students to be able to see, oh, this is what college jazz looks like. So that's a little just view into the future. And I just had a student earlier today that said, hey, I really like baseball and I really like choir, but I think I'm going to major in music. And that was one of those kids in the Jazz Singers. So one of those, moments like that where they can see themselves as in another world, or I have a bunch of choir students that are taking part in a musical, and a bunch of musical students that are like, hey, when are the auditions for choir next year? So I just think, once again, the more that we can just encourage that that big, connection and spreading of students across multiple disciplines and across all those creative outlets, I think is just really important and good for us.
So you're finding the time for all of this too. That's an important piece of the puzzle. You started the conversation with, you've really dug into all the things you do, because you don't just teach. Who picked the musical? Who's rehearsing the musical? Who decided on this jazz band collaboration? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, musical-wise, the show we're doing this year, you probably haven't heard of it. It's called Zombie Prom. So it's this crazy zombie-themed high school musical, basically. It's kind of like if you took High School Musical and Little Shop of Horrors and just kind of combined them together. So it's it's got that crazy little, that crazy element to it, but it's high school themed. So,
yes, I'm not going to lie. My shirt right now says we're all in this together. And every time I wear this shirt, I start doing the hand clap. But I loved High School Musical, but I taught it at a summer camp, and that was so much fun.
Yeah.
The zombie thing, I think, makes it super lucrative for all your high schoolers.
Well, it's something that it's the right amount of hook that I think, everyone's like, what is this zombie prom thing? So I think it'll be really cool with the kids. But that's just in collaboration with the theater department. So that's Michael Cleveland, who's the head theater director, and then Carrie Peters, who's the assistant theater director. So we've been figuring out scheduling and stuff like that, and it just takes an immense amount of forethought and planning just to make sure that all the kids could be accounted for, despite all these conflicts and stuff like that. But it's taken a lot of work to get where we are. But I think with everything set up, we're going to be in great shape. And we're just starting rehearsals. We just had our first little meetup on Monday. So tomorrow music rehearsals begin, and we jump into things headlong. So.
Okay, so it sounds like you're balancing all this really well. Like, you don't look tired or exhausted or wiped out. You kind of look excited. How are you managing the whole work-life balance? That is sometimes hard to find that first year.
Sure. I definitely have moments that I am feeling very successful, and then moments when I feel like I'm not successful. And I'll be honest, my fiance and I have had some conversations this year about okay, we need to make sure we have couple time throughout the week, because I'll be working on something. Well, and it's high school choir. I'll be working on something until 4, and then there's a rehearsal from 4 to 6:30, and then I need to go to this rehearsal from 7 to 10, and then I come home and it's 11, and she's asleep, and it's over. So it's in all the joy that is the work that I get to do and the people I get to work with, I have to prioritize her, and I have to prioritize us. And that is something that I think as a couple we're working through, and she's working through it too. It's mixed too. She was traveling for a couple of weeks in the early semester auditioning for graduate school. So, we understand that in us both being, because she's a clarinetist, I probably should mention that, in us both being professionals, we both really love music and want it to be a part of our lives, but we also love each other. So there's just a lot of learning that I've had at home, and definitely long-term skills that I am growing. And I think that's just growing up, being with someone.
Yeah. Just realizing, I always like that feeling of suddenly you see outside of your own bubble. And it happened to all of us in our methods classes. I just remember vividly being told it was going to happen in, I think, elementary methods or something, and it flipping halfway through the semester. All of a sudden you were more concerned with the 25 little kindergartners sitting crisscross applesauce singing their hearts out than all the stuff that you had been concerned about at that point.
Yeah.
Then that has to transfer to being with someone else and taking priority with your life outside. It's such a good, like you said, long-term skills and long-term life plans to focus on.
Mm-hmm. And I think also being present as well in the moment. We both understand, Dominique and I both understand, we may not always have 5 hours a week with each other. We may not always have 3 hours a week with each other, really quality time. But if we can be present for each other with that time, it just makes such a bigger difference than, being on your phone or just kind of wanting to relax. You have to make each other a priority when you can, because you don't always have the opportunity to make each other a priority.
So important. So what do you do on those days when you are feeling not successful? How do you loop yourself back up and go back the next day all happy dory?
Well, sometimes I'm not happy dory, and I just have to be real with my students. Like I just have to be like I had a lousy day, or you have to be honest. Now that doesn't need to infect the entire rehearsal, but sometimes a little bit of just transparency and honesty, I think, reads well with the students, because the students don't want a teacher that's putting on a show every single day, if that makes sense. They want someone that's real, and they want someone that they feel like they can be themselves around, much like they would want you to be yourself around them. So I have to be real, but also sometimes I just have to, I may not feel great going into a day, but usually what I'll find is the kids will lift me up. And it won't take very long, from just a kid coming into the classroom, just saying hello. Like earlier today, I had a kid who said he brought a microphone in and said, "Hey, Mr. Feather, I know that we're doing recordings for test offs for the UIL choir concert. Would you like to use this microphone that I brought from home to test off students?" And, it's not the most practical thing to be able to put that sort of stuff together. But, just the fact that a student would think of that, think of something like that and care. And you just always have to look at those kids and just find the things that just make you so excited to see them and just embrace those moments. So, but in terms of like burnout or stress, I do feel stressed from time to time. And part of that is just a me thing. Like sometimes I overcommit to things, and I long-term know that I just need to say no to things more often. But in the world where, doing choir things and doing shows and spending time with people, there's just a lot of things to go, around, and it's hard to always juggle everything. So I've given myself a little bit of grace, and just in knowing that this is the first year. So things are just going to be a little more stressful. But I also think going forward, like being able to reel back from certain things and go, maybe this doesn't need to be a priority right now. Like maybe, just because I have a bunch of work on my desk doesn't mean that it needs to get done today. Does that make sense? Sometimes I just need to set the work that I have down and go home and spend time with those people in my life that fill me up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you'll always have more to do. Yes, you'll always have more to do. And I'm probably not like anyone else out there who's listening. You want it all done. You want to complete it all. You want to do well. But sometimes you have to square that with, how important is it to do this task versus spend some time with someone that I care about? So, it's hard to make that balance work, but I feel like I try and be intentional about it. I try.
I love that you're sharing these stories, because I think as we're teaching these methods classes, or even as we're in the field, it's just a good reminder to know that you don't have to be perfect. And that's one of the coolest parts about our profession, is that teaching is evolving and you are always growing, because the students are always changing and the content is always changing. Well, you still have UILs all the time and you still have to be able to share read.
Right.
But you know what I mean when I say that. So there's so much growth that can happen. So it's great to see something almost through the eyes of the beginner, because when you're a beginner at something, that curve is so steep. You just you make progress and you get up that curve. I think about PRs, like the first time you actually train for something and you take all this time off your next race. Like, yes, I'm going to do that again. But the next progress isn't quite as steep usually. And eventually, as you're becoming an expert, the progress is just so minuscule that you have to learn to celebrate those little tiny things. And I love with what you're saying, the awareness of the long-term plan and the being present in the moment and going and learning and growing. You're doing all the right things. And I'm so glad we're able to highlight and remember this through your first year experience.
Well, I do, don't get me wrong. I do feel like there are certain things that I'm definitely like plateauing on, not because I like in terms of like sound, for instance. At the beginning of this year, I didn't know anything about sound, and I have a jazz group, so we all have microphones, and there's so much things about like equalizing mics or just getting the group to like blend and how big of a difference it makes just understanding how frequency ranges works, cutting audios to blend with instruments and stuff. But there's so much that I've learned. There's so much that I learned first semester, and it like kept me afloat. And now when I like go back to think about, okay, well, let's see, how can we add in like this high pass filter here, or these other things. I know it probably sounds like a bunch of random jargon, but
I know exactly
but
what
it
you're
is
talking about.
it is like it's those little tiny things that you have to appreciate and look back on and be like, okay, this is going to make this better. So like for instance, we just figured out a way to get our bass microphone to add resonant frequencies and amplify the lower octave. So
nice.
if we're like singing a song and we end on a cool like jazz chord, we can really beef out that low note at the end. Add that nice low root. So don't get me wrong, there's still lots to learn, but it's just like you said, taking pride in those little minuscule things.
But at first, man, you're just soaring.
Yes.
Which is why it sometimes hurts when you fall back down a little bit, but it's okay.
Oh, yes, it is. That's a part of the process.
All right. So you're working on diversifying and you're doing lots of other things that are part of the job. You're still loving the normal part of the job. Looking ahead, what's next? Because we'll check in with you when the semester and the year is all the way over. So what stands between us right now in March and the end of school at the end of May?
Gotcha. So we've got, we have the musical. We have our final concert of the year after UIL, which UIL is April 11th. We're the very first group to go. We're going at, I think, 8 in the morning. So it's going to be, our basses are going to be great, and our tenors are going to be nice and awake, I hope. So we'll see. So UIL will finish in mid-April, and then May we'll have our final concert. So for me, I think going into this last semester, it's going to be a lot about recruitment and retention, just continuing to make choir a fun place to be and a place to stay and a community for the kids. And with Texas music, I think for Texans out there, you understand like that third quarter, that beginning of the second semester is always a little bit, you're just kind of really pushing to try and get some of those skills learned. And there have been some moments in that third quarter where I felt like I was pushing so much that maybe I was betraying that long-term goal of keeping those kids in the choir. You know what I'm saying? So I think coming back to singing some music that we're really proud of, that we really love to sing, not because it's on a list, but because it means something to us.
It's fun.
Yes. And like having special moments with each other through our songs, through our music, and just making the environment a joy to be a part of. Because if they buy into the environment, if they love the environment, then they will continue. I mean, not only will they continue to feed into the program, but I think they'll stay. So now it's still a first year, so we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's something that really mattered a lot to me when I was in choir, and through my experience and through my friends' experience. So I think just continuing to try and resonate with the students and make it special whenever they're there.
Awesome. Okay, before we wrap this up, what advice would you give? Like, we're going to have, my class is going to listen to this episode. They've been listening to the whole series. So what advice do you have for those teachers that are not yet teachers, or the teachers in their early career just like you?
A great mentor of mine says this phrase, choose joy. And it just resonates with me, and it's something that I just hold on to. When you're faced with adversity or stress, it can be very easy to kind of back away from it, to kind of fear it. And I think if you can just embrace the discomfort that you're feeling with optimism and positivity, even if truly in your heart of hearts you're a little overwhelmed, the more I think you can just try and keep a positive mindset. I think the more you can grow, and the more people will see that you care about what you're doing, and they'll support you as well. And in an odd sort of way, when you choose joy, joy chooses you. You are what you see in the world, and the world is what you see in it.
That's such a great quote, Kyle. When you choose joy, joy chooses you. That is so good. And what a great piece of wisdom. All right. I cannot wait to hear what you're doing at the end of the semester. You have to keep us posted. And thank you for giving us your time as you're going through this first year.
Of course. Thank you so much, Emmy.
Choose joy, and joy will choose you. No matter what you're going through right now, my friend, whether you're trying to keep all the water in your bathtub or you're trying to add more water and learn more things, or maybe you're shifting expectations or practicing different expectations, or maybe you're also going through some diversification like we've seen with Kyle. I hope whatever you are doing, that you are finding things that spark joy, that you are finding moments to be present, and that you know, my friend, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially that first year teaching. And I'll see you next time on the Music It Matters podcast.